For this, we're going to continue the conversation. For more on what's next for U.S.-Cuba relations after Fidel Castro's death, let's bring in Congressman Carlos Curbelo from Miami. Good morning. Congressman, just help us try to understand how you think President-elect Trump should approach the country.
Andrew, good morning from Miami, where there's not a lot of mourning going on after the passing of Fidel Castro. Of course, this is where many of the victims of Fidel Castro's regime live. What we're going to see, or at least we hope, after President-elect Trump takes over on January 20th, is a policy that actually holds the Cuban government accountable, not just to make economic reforms, but also to make political reforms. Everything has been very one-sided up to this point. This has been a legacy-building exercise for the Obama administration. It's very clear that the president wanted to be known and wants to be remembered as the president who normalized relations with Cuba. But that's really not an end. The end is for Cuba to be a free and democratic nation and a true partner for the United States, a country where U.S. companies and Americans can actually feel comfortable visiting and doing business. And that is the goal, to put pressure on the Cuban government, because we really haven't had a negotiation. It's been a giveaway up to now,
Congressman,
and
what does
that
that
doesn't
look like?
advance U.S. national interests.
What does that look like? In terms of what we're supposed to do, in terms of what I imagine has to be a rollback of some of the concessions that have been made thus far.
Well, here's some simple demands we can make. The Cuban government still has one of the most sophisticated and vast spy networks in the United States. They sell intelligence on the United States to the Russians, to the Chinese, to the North Koreans, to the Iranians. How about they dismantle that? The Cuban government harbors fugitives of U.S. law, including a cop killer from New Jersey who's there, many others who have defrauded Medicare. The Cuban government continues assisting the Maduro regime in Venezuela, which was a major trade partner for us here in Florida. We've lost up to $4 billion in bilateral trade every year for about a decade now, thanks to Cuba's intervention in Venezuela. So all these things need to stop. And then, of course, morally, we have to ask the Cuban government to respect human rights in Cuba and to stop beating and oppressing people. So I think that's the message that the new administration is going to take to the Cubans, and it's going to be up to them whether they want to have a real relationship or just this one-sided deal.
Your parents were Cuban exiles, so you approach this from a very unique perspective. In terms of the leverage that the U.S. has, I mean, obviously, a big thing is the economic leverage and basically going back on the executive order that President Obama had enacted. In terms of what that could look like, is there a halfway, in your view, where you don't sever all economic ties, but perhaps maybe you curb, for instance, U.S. business ties or dealings with state-owned enterprises and sort of cut it off there? I mean, is there a halfway here, or is it an all-or-nothing approach in your view?
Well, that would make a lot of sense. Look, everyone wants to help the Cuban people. What we don't want to do is help the Cuban dictatorship and strengthen that dictatorship, because Raul Castro has one goal: to be able to pass along the family farm to the next generation without any disruptions. We know that that's not going to be good for the Cuban people, and we know it's certainly not going to be good for the United States, because this is a government that's been an enemy of our country for 58 years now. Remember, the men in power in Cuba today are the same men who had nuclear missiles installed in Cuba and pointed at the United States. Now, they don't have that capability today, and they wouldn't do that today, but this is the mentality. So we certainly need to put pressure on them to disrupt that government, to give the Cuban people a chance to thrive, and to have a genuine partner and ally 90 miles away that we can trust and really do business with.
Congressman, appreciate your perspective this morning. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
You bet.